Okay, welcome everyone. This is actually going to be the last SCA class of I think it's the last week of the program. So it's the last of this Midrash series. I hope it's not the last of me teaching Midrashim. So I chose for today's topic, and I hope you'll enjoy me, today's class. You'll enjoy what I'm going to go through. Just to speak for a moment, just reflecting back a few weeks ago when we started this class, looking through the Midrashim on the weekly Perashat, and we started a few weeks ago in this class looking at the Rambam and looking at the crucial importance at the way we look at Hazal, the way we look at our Chachamim when they wrote their Midrashim, and the goal with Midrashim, right? This deeper understanding of the Pesukim, but also many times the Hachamim speaking in parables. What I wanted to do today is take you through my journey with Midrashim by pointing you to certain Midrashim that I came in contact with. And it could be that for all of you as well, you came in contact with throughout your upbringing or your learning of Midrashim, that I found later on throughout this journey to have an impact on the way I looked at Midrash. So I like to take you through, quote unquote, that journey by looking at those Midrashim that I discovered a few years ago, again, that I learned when I was a child, that I learned throughout those years of me being exposed to Midrash, and that really led to my appreciation of Midrash. And I think that's the key, right? If my goal, one of my goals for this class really was the understanding of the beauty of the Midrash and the sensitivity that the Midrash has for the Tanakh. Right, keep in mind, right in front of you, you have a source sheet. Right, it's built from technology. Right, it makes things a little bit easier. You can imagine for the writers of the Midrash, almost 2,000 years ago, or some Midrashim a little over 1,000 years ago, how difficult it was to connect different Pesukim in the Tanakh unless you really knew the Tanakh by heart. Okay, it required a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge, and a deeper understanding of the Pesukim. So this is one of the first Midrashim that really pointed me in that direction. Let me explain here that we have to understand that Rashi's Perush on the Torah, right? Rashi famously brings a lot of Midrashim into his Perush, but he doesn't always quote the entire Midrash that he is basing his Perush on. Rashi built his Perush on the Midrash, but he didn't always bring every opinion in the Midrash. He didn't always bring every element of the Midrash, either because he was building his own Perush, or because he was expecting you to have read the Midrash as well. Okay, any questions so far? Please feel free to ask, chat it in. But this is one of the first Midrashim that really hit me it struck a certain note for me. And I like to speak about this Midrash. The Pasuk says that when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, it says, Vatara isha vateled ben, vatere oto ki tov hu vatispeneu shelosha yerachim. Okay, yes, I'm aware this is not this week's Perasha. This week's Perasha as a whole has a lot of halacha in it. That being said, there's a lot less of the Agadah type of Midrash on the Perasha. And since this is the last class of this series, I wanted to spend the time looking at these Midrashim that helped me uncover the beauty of Midrash. So the Pasuk says that the woman gave birth, right, to a son. She got pregnant, she gave birth to a son. Vatere oto ki tov hu. And she saw that he was tov, that he was good. So she hid him for 3 months. And one of the more famous Midrashim here, this is Rashi brings it, Ki tovhu, Keshenolad nitmaleh habayit kulo ora. That when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the room was filled with light. Right? Where did the Midrash get this from? Where did the Midrash get this from? That when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the room is filled with light. Where do you get that from? Where does this idea and concept? Where did the Hachamim even think about the fact that the room is filled with light when Moshe Rabbeinu was born? You could have said many things, right? What is it exactly? Right? Have any of you ever learned about what caused the Midrash or Rashi to explain that the room was filled with light? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, because the 7 days of creation, it says kitov and light, and that's what they get it from.
Right?
I think.
Exactly. Right? Hachamim in the Midrash connected to creation. Let's read that Midrash. Because Adele, interestingly enough, Rashi only brings part of the Midrash. The fuller Midrash has many different opinions. Pasuk says, Vatere oto kitovhu. The Gemara in Masechet Sotah says as follows. Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer Tov Shemo. Rabbi Meir explained that the Pasuk means that his mother called him Tov, called him good. That was his name, right? If you think about it, Moshe, who named Moshe? Well, Bat Paro. What name did he have when he was a younger child? Midrash says over here, according to Rabbi Meir, his name was Tov. His name was good. Vatere oto ki tovhu. She saw that his name should be Tov. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says no, Tuvia Shemo. Right? Tuvia, the goodness of God. Right? Because ki tovhu. Who's who? That God was good. Ki tovia. Not that Moshe was good, but the name that she gave to Moshe was that God is good. Look at this son I got. Rabbi Nehemiah says, Hagun unbiut. It means that Moshe was proper for prophecy. Ahirim omrim, others say, and that's actually an opinion in the Mishnah, in Bariatot, Nolad keshehu mahul. Says that he was born circumcised. And then finally, and this is what Adele was referring to, the Hachamim Omrim, the Hachamim say, B'sha'ah shenolad Moshe, nitmaleh habayit kulo or. This is the opinion that Rashi quotes, that at the hour, at the time that Moshe was born, the room filled with light. Ketiv hacha, it says here in the Pasuk, Vatere oto kitovhu. Yocheved, the mother, saw that she was good, that he was good. Vatere oto kitovhu. Uchtiv hatam, and it says in Bereshit, on the first day when light was created, Vayar Elohim et haor kitov. It says that the light was good. Look at the similarity in language. Vatere oto kitovhu. Right? It doesn't give you the name of the mother. It just says she saw him that he was good. And like Vayad Elohim et haor kitov, like it says that God saw, Vayad, God saw the or, that it was good. This Midrash digs a bit deeper than just this. There's a lot more to what the Chachamim are saying than just simply connecting Moshe Rabbeinu with Beriat HaOlam. There's a lot more there. And I'd like to offer an epiphany that I had when I read this Midrash inside for the first time. I think I was learning this Gemara. And it was kind of an epiphany of sorts. And it was fascinating. I realized how deeply the Hachamim understood the Torah. Much more. Let me repeat that, sorry, so you got logged off. The Hachamim understood a lot more than just this linguistic connection between the two Pesukim of creation of the world and Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's think for a moment. There's a lot more going on over here. The The Hachamim are pointing that when the leader of Am Yisrael was born, there's light in the world. Consider, when the world was created, when God wanted to bring, right, light to the world, right, and he brings it into the world, the future plan is human beings, B'Selem Elokim. He's creating, there's creation over here, there's a hope, right? That's light generally. When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, there's a different creation that's happening. And the Hachamim, I believe, want us to think about this. That with the birth of Moshe, there's also the birth of the possibility of the nation of Israel, right? The nation of Israel is being formed in the beginning of Sefer Shemot. Similar to the Ramban says. The Ramban famously says that you have in Sefer Bereshit the story of the Avot, the individuals. The story of Shemot is the nation. It's the story of the nation. Here you have the birth of the nation. It's a different creation of the world. It's a second creation story. The first one's being in Bereshit, this one being in Sefer Shemot. And this creation is fascinating. You have the mother, the father, during the time of a decree, having a child. She hides him in the Nile River, and she takes care, right? The family takes care of him and breeds him, and he eventually becomes the leader of Am Yisrael. Now, let's take the Midrash a step further. I want someone to answer this. Where do we see Or in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu?
Karne Or.
Right? The Karan Or. He lights up from Torah. Right? He lights up. Very good. From, right, his face. And by the way, the word is not Or, it's Or. It's the ayin.
Yeah, but there is with an ayin.
I just said it's with an ayin. Correct. I said there is with an ayin. I wanted to make sure that we know that it's with an ayin. But it's clear that the Midrash, and I'm not connecting it linguistically now, I'm now connecting it conceptually, right? What is ki karan or penei Moshe? The word karan there is the key word, that his face was radiating, right? His face was radiating. You think here about the, you think here about the light emanating from Moshe Rabbeinu's face, and you think of the Torah. You think of Vaya'avor Adonai al panav vayikra, and therefore Moshe's face, his panim, were lighting up. So even though the word Or, Aleph, Vav, Resh is not there, the idea there, Ki Karan Or Penei Moshe, is that his face was radiating. So Moshe Rabbeinu eventually radiates from the Torah. There's light coming from his face. I believe the Hachamim knew all of this. They understood that when Moshe Rabbeinu was, the room was filled with light. I even think this is why Rashi chose this specific midrash, not that he was born circumcised. Or, again, he might say that elsewhere, but I think here the light with Moshe Rabbeinu being born is crucial to our understanding of the importance of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu and what he would bring to the world. Give me another example of Or, of light in Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Right? What else emanates light from it? Well, a fire does, right? The burning bush, right? You think of the Sineh Bo'er Ba'esh. You think of something that's lighting, right? Again, not necessarily this word Or, but I'm just thinking about Moshe Rabbeinu's life being surrounded by Torah, and we say Kinen Mitzvah Torah Or, right? And the way the Hachamim perceived Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's point number one for me when I discovered this midrash, when I saw this midrash, and I never understood it. Never understood this midrash until I read it inside in the midrash itself. I think I actually read this in the Gemara and then also in Bereshit Rabbah. A lot more just clicked for me. And I'll give you another midrash as well. Okay, this one's a little more famous. What's less famous is the full Rashi on this one. We know that in that same perek with Moshe Rabbeinu, it says that Bat Paro went lirhos al hayor, v'na'arotea holechot al yad hayor. Right, her maidservants were walking by the Nile, but tere et hateva, she sees the teva by the reeds, v'tishlach et amata v'tikahea, and she sent her ama v'tikahea, and she fetched the teva. Now, what does this mean? What did she send out? How did she grab Moshe out of the Nile? Right? Anyone know the famous midrash that's taught? Right? How did the Bat Paro grab Moshe? So there's a famous midrash that she outstretched her arm. Good. Her arm. Did you know, Tuni, that Rashi disagrees with that grammatically? Most of us don't know, and I didn't know till I discovered this, that Rashi explains on the spot, et amata et shivhata. He explains it that ama means her maidservant. V'rabotenu darshu, but our rabbis, right, from this, they explained leshon yad. They explained it as a hand. Rashi says, "Aval lefi dikduk," according to grammar, leshon hakodesh, haya lo linaked ammata. If it means a hand, it has to be the word amma, not ama. Degusha. Behem darshu, but they, the Chachamim, explain et amata et yada, and the Chachamim say v'nishtar beba amata amot harbe, that her hand was outstretched many amot, from the word amma. Now, this is not the Peshat. Rashi is clear. And most teachers teach this as Rashi's explanation. And it's clearly not. He clearly says that's not the Peshat. And this got me thinking, Rashi, right, understood that Midrash has importance to it, but it comes after the Peshat. So then what's the purpose of this Midrash? Let's read the Midrash in the Gemara, okay? Gemara says as follows. Gemara Masechet Sotah Daf Yod Bet. The same Masechet we were just reading. Vatishlach et amata v'tikachea. Rabbi Yehuda ben Nehemiah. There's a mahloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah. Had amar yadah, had amar shivhatah. One says it's her hand and one says it's her shivha. Man de amar yadah. Tichtib ammata. The one that says it's yad because it says amata. The one that says it's shivhata, it's because it should have said yada. If it means hand, it should say hand, right? And it doesn't. Now, what's the purpose of this midrash, right? And again, I think it boils down to the concept of the miraculous nature in which Moshe was conceived, right? We just said the or when he was born, but the fact that he's born during the decree, she's able to hide him for 3 months. And then you have this possible fanciful midrash of her pulling him out. And I always think of the Space Jam scene when I think of this, right? Her outstretched arm. Where do we think about an outstretched arm conceptually? Right? We think of Yad Hazaka Zeroa Netuya. The whole story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is with a strong and outstretched arm. Using the arm to do what? To take Bnei Israel out of Egypt. So again, I looked at this Midrash and I say, maybe there's something much deeper over here. But that imagery, I think the Hachamim wanted us to think of this imagery. Think of the imagery of Bat Paro outstretching her arm to grab Moshe and save him. She's saving the savior of Am Yisrael. Think of that imagery as we're thinking now of the redemption of Am Yisrael, the redemption of this human being, this goodly, tov human being, will lead to the redemption of Am Yisrael. Right? That's the way I view this midrash. Right? These amot harbe, it took great lengths to get Moshe out. It took great lengths to get Bnei Israel out of Egypt similarly. And I think that the midrash, or whichever rabbi over here, I'm trying to think if this rabbi, is it Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nehemiah, it tells you man de amar, it doesn't tell you which rabbi said which, but whichever rabbi it was, telling you something about the story through the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. Any questions until here? For me, this was just like beauty of Midrash. And again, these are the Midrashim that I discovered in, yes, Grace, question.
So I really learned it once with Norman Didia that Amata is really like she stretched her arm, but it's kind of that she was stretching the arm of the law because she was going against her father's decree.
Good.
And it's like, he said that it's something that's still held now. Like the arm of the law is something that's still said now, that she overstepped her bounds and stretched out her arm of the, like stretched the arm of the law to go get him because she knew she was going against a decree.
Very nice. I like that too.
I like that one.
That shows you that the Midrash is so deep. There are multiple interpretations that can come out of the Midrash, right? There could be multi-dimensional, right? Multi-dimensional meaning to these Midrashim, and that's beautiful, right? I think that's the point. I think sometimes it's okay to say there's multiple possible interpretations of Midrash. The Hachamim might have meant all of them, actually. That's why it's Derash. Derash requires you to dig deep and uncover certain layers that are not necessarily there on the surface. As you dig deeper, you might get more and more and more. Another Midrash that when I was teaching back a number of years ago in Flatbush, actually, and I was teaching this Midrash. I actually didn't know the Midrash. Let me change that. I didn't remember this Midrash. A student asked me about it. This is the Midrash about the 10 plagues. It says, "Vayet Aharon et yado al memei Mitzrayim." Aaron outstretched his arm on the waters of Egypt. Vatal hasefardea vatechas eretz Yisrael. It says the Sephardea came up. The frogs came up. Here's another example of Rashi bringing Peshat and Midrash. Vatal hasefardea. Sephardea ahat haita. There was one Sephardea, says the Midrash. Vayu makin ota vehi matezet nehivim nehivim. They would hit it, right? The Mitzrim would hit it, and it would split up into many swarms. Zehu midrasho. That is the Midrash. Ufshuto yesh lomar, and the Peshat is that a swarm of Sephardeim is called Sephardeya. Right? When you say a swarm, you speak about it in singular, like the word kinam. Right? So I asked Rabbi Eliach at the time, this is going back maybe 7 years ago, part of my journey and discovery of Midrash and its significance. I said, Rabbi, I didn't have an answer for this student. He asked me, first of all, what does it mean that they hit it and it kept, splitting up? And where did the Midrash get from that there's one frog, right? So the one frog, he told me very, very easily, the Midrash is sensitive to the way the Torah, writes, right? And the way the Pesukim come to us. It's important for us to look at the Pesukim, and the Midrash is very sensitive to differences in the Pesukim. If you look carefully, and I'm opening this up right now, if you look carefully at the Pesukim about Sephardeya, sorry, I was in the wrong Chumash, you keep seeing the word Sephardeim, Sephardeim, Sephardeim all over. Every single time the plague is brought up, it says in Pasuk 27, Sephardeim. Pasuk 28, Sephardeim. 29, Sephardeim. The whole warning is about the Sephardeim. Right? The whole warning, and when it happens, minus one time. The one time it's described as happening, when it actually happens, it says Vata'al ha-Sephardeya. The pasuk uses the singular. And the Midrash, and this is where I learned the sensitivity to the way the Torah writes things, is that sensitivity that we use for Peshat, that sensitivity that we use for explaining differences in the Pesukim, right, is a sensitivity that the Midrash had. He said, why would the Torah change the language all of a sudden to one Sephardeya? It must be, says the Midrash, that one Sephardeya came up, and when they hit it, many came out. So I asked Rabbi Eliach, what is this hitting it? What does that mean? What did the Midrash want to teach us when saying that they hit this main Sephardeya? And he said to me as follows. He said it's a hyperbole, right? The exaggeration in terms of trying to teach us that when you're hitting the Sephardeya, the Mitzrim were trying their absolute best to get rid of this Makkah, not by turning to God, not by doing teshuvah and realizing their mistakes, no, by smashing it, right? They fought the Makkah with a Makkah. They fought this Makkah by striking back. And striking back at a Makkah doesn't solve the problem, it exacerbates the problem, right? The issue gets much worse. And he says the Chachamim want us to understand how the Mitzrim themselves amplified their issues. They made them even worse by not acceding to God's, right, request. Right? And when he said that, I said, wow, it's just beautiful. I was learned. I knew my stuff, but not deep enough to understand the Midrash. And I realized that I needed to change my glasses that I used when reading Midrash than reading Peshat. You need a different set of glasses to use. And I'm going to show you something cool about that. Very interesting about these glasses. Who can read Midrash, right? Who could explain Midrash? Who could write Midrashim? Look at this. Look at the Midrash that we learned from about this idea of the Sephardeya. Taneh Rabbi Akiva Omer, Sephardeya Ahat Haita, Vehi Hishrisa, Umileat Eretz Yisrael. A little bit differently. This Midrash says that Rabbi Akiva said that there's one Sephardeya, and it produced a swarm of frogs and filled the land of Egypt with more frogs. Okay? Says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Akiva, Malecha etzel Haggadah. What are you doing dealing with Midrashim of Agadah? Kalemi daberotecha, stop speaking. Velech etzel negaim ve'aholot. Stop with your words of Midrash. We're talking about Midrash Agadah, of these stories. Velech etzel negaim ve'aholot. And go back to halacha. Go focus on halacha. He's telling Rabbi Akiva, you don't know the Midrash. The Midrash is Sephardeya Ahat Haita. There was one Sephardeya, Vesharka lahen ubau, and it croaked, and then the others came. Okay? Fascinating too. That one rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who famously became, right, to replace for, how many weeks, replaced with Rabban Gamliel versus Rabbi Yoshua. But he tells Rabbi Akiva, you got to stop with that. Right? This is not your field. This is not your area to write the Midrash or to quote the Midrash. He's telling him something. I think that itself is eye-opening. That one rabbi in the Gemara tells the other rabbi, what we're talking about now about Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But in the story that's told, it's stop because this is not your field. I'm sure you find this fascinating. I definitely did. because it also speaks maybe to, with the explanation of Midrash, that even the writing of the Midrash and how it was brought down to us, you have one rabbi tell the rabbi, you got it all wrong. You don't understand what really happened, which itself is very interesting. Not what really happened. What the Hachamim say is the Midrash on this specific pasuk that we can learn from. Any questions on that before I go on? Okay, so as I got deeper into Midrash learning, here's another sort of Midrash that I constantly get that question of, did God really tell Abraham that? Did Abraham really tell God that? Okay, in Akedat Yishak, and through this Midrash, we're going to learn about a different sensitivity to Midrash that the Midrash had in reading the Pesukim of the Torah. When Abraham is about to slaughter his child, it says, "Vayomer al tishlach yadecha el hana'ar ve'al tas lo me'uma." Don't raise your hand against the boy, and don't do anything to him. Ki atayadati ki yireh Elohim ata. I know that you are Yireh Elohim. I know you did not withhold your son from me. There, the Midrash fills in on a conversation between God and Abraham. And this is common for the Midrash. We have to ask ourselves where it comes from. Once we know where it comes from, we have to realize what the Midrash is doing. Because this is not the only place that the Midrash brings up this possible conversation. Again, we have to look at this as a possible conversation, not as an actual conversation that happened. Rashi brings al tishhat, al tishlach, don't raise your hand, lishchot, to slaughter Yitzhak. Midrash says that Abraham turned to God, said, Amar lo im ken lehinam bati lekan. That means that I came here for nothing. E'esebo habala ve'osim minu me'adam. Let me at least bring out a little blood to you, God. Let me at least do part of the action. You made me come here for nothing. Amar lo al ta'as lo me'uma. Al ta'as bo. Don't do anything at all to the child. Now, what's the purpose of these midrashim? We didn't see so many of these midrashim. We dealt more with parables, but we dealt a little bit less because of the nature of our midrashim that we studied, of these conversations between a character in Chumash and God. And what's going on over here, right? Very simply, what's going on over here? What is the midrash pointing out that you might miss when you're reading the pasuk on the peshat level? What might you miss? You might miss. Yeah.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
Maybe that sometimes we think we know what God wants rather than listen to God himself. Because if he asked Abraham, let me just do it a little bit. And for us to actually really, really listen to God and not do what we think he wants and do what he really, really says, I think it's hard.
So I didn't get there yet. I'm asking a much more basic question than that to start. I think you went a level deeper than when I was asking, which is good. We'll get there in a second, Adele, and you're going to answer that again. But what is the more basic reason that the Midrash brings to bring up this conversation that looks like it? Why would the Midrash even bring it up? The most basic concept in the Midrash that the Torah does not waste words. And so when God says, don't hurt the child and don't do anything to him, the Midrash is asking, why would God say the same thing twice, or at least the nuance and say it twice? Just tell Abraham, don't hurt the child. Similar question when he says, Kahna et bincha, take your son, et yahidecha, your only son, asher ahavta, that you love, et Yishak. That opens up our understanding that Midrash wanted us to say that when there's something being repeated in the Torah, there's a reason for this repetition. And I want you to understand that, because that's a little bit difficult to understand when you're reading the Peshat. Because that's how we speak. Don't hurt him, don't touch him. That's how we speak. But when you're nuanced like the Midrash, so then it goes down deeper into the psyche. And here, Adele, is what you said. The Midrash digs deeper into the psyche of Avraham Avinu. Right? It's not so easy for Abraham to just say, okay, God, I won't do it. Right? There's something deeper happening here that the Midrash sees reflected in the repetition. So Adele, now say again what you said before, if you could.
I don't know if it's their goal, but I just think that a lot of times we think we know what God wants, and then we're so stuck on the certain path we're going in that to switch, no, please, let me just do a little, like, it's just like, let's say, for example, very different side, but you buy someone's house for Shabbat and you want to help, and they tell you not to help. No, let me just do something. And let's say they really, really, really don't want you to help, but you're so insistent on doing your way. So I think here too, maybe he goes all this way. He wants to do something, and then God has to emphasize that he really wants nothing.
Right. Which, again, the Midrash is using, by the way, this repetition to bring this out. That this, the Torah in general presents us a story, but there are nuances of, right, the text that, in a sense, dig deeper to something more happening beyond just the text alone. The whole psyche of the human here, with Abraham being told, take his son, go, and he's doing it. He went to go do it. And now God says, no, it's not so simple. There's a lot of layers over here. But again, I want to point out those layers. And I know that in Peshat, we want to uncover those layers. That might not be Peshat per se. And that's a little difficult sometimes for me to understand. I don't look at this repetition necessarily as Dirash sometimes. Maybe there's Peshat to that. What does that mean, Peshat? Right? Well, when you're reading a Peshat, you read the Pasuk and you explain it. Don't put your hand out to the child to hurt him, and don't even do anything to him at all. Basically, let him go. The Dirash looks into the nuance of the way that it's communicated to Abraham and digs deeper into that meaning. And that brings out that meaning that is brought out by Bereshit Rabbah. Right? By Bereshit Rabbah, telling you about all the different things happening in the conversation between Abraham and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes? Good? So as I got deeper into this way of thinking, and as I appreciated it more and more and more, I got to certain midrashim where I really asked myself, Nathan, do you really fully understand what this midrash is doing? Right? Because again, you want to understand it. You want to really grasp what the midrash is trying to do. And so here's a pasuk where it says, "Vayita eshel b'Be'er Sheva." Abraham planted a tamarisk at Be'er Sheva. Vayikra sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam, and he called out there in the name of God. And so on that spot, Rashi quoted the Midrash again in our Gemara in Sotah again. Seems like in that Gemara there's a lot of Midrash Agada. And he says as follows: Al yedeh oto eshel nikra shemol shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eloah l'chol ha'olam. Abraham used that eshel, used that tree, that plant, to call out in the name of God. Le'achar she'ochlim ve'shotim, after they would eat and drink, he would tell them, say beracha to whoever you ate from. So they were going to bless him. Do you think that you ate from me? No, you ate from whoever created the world. And here I was a little bit stuck. I think it was Ruthie Towell at the time who explained to me over here, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam, that Vayikra Sham is an extra. Just say Vayikra b'Shem Adonai. What's Vayikra Sham? Specifically by this eshel, by this tamarisk plant, tree. But I also realized something more going on over here. And the only way I understood more, let me be clear, when you read the Perush of Rashi and you see a Midrash, it's a little bit accessible these days to just click on the link and find where this Midrash comes from. Because this Midrash comes from the Gemara. And the Gemara says as follows, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam. Amar Resh Lakish, Al Tikre Vayikra Ela Vayakri. Don't read this Vayikra Sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam. Read the pasuk Vayakri Sham. He caused others to call out in the name of God. Again, the Midrash is using the liberty. And you don't have to add the yod there. It's a question of nekudot. How do you read this word? Right? Where did the Midrash get this from? Where does Resh Lakish get from that he's causing others to get involved with appreciating God? And it hit me last night when I was preparing this. And again, these pieces, it's like a puzzle, Midrash. I look at it like you don't have all the pieces. You're trying to piece together the puzzle. As you're putting it together, certain parts look like they fit, and then you find that other piece, and when you fit it in, more makes sense. And something clicked. I said, what is this Vayita Eshel Biv'er Shava? He planted an eshel. Who plants in the Tanakh? Right? Who plants in the Tanakh? Who plants things? Nata, Vayita. Where does this idea of lintoa come from in the Torah and Tanakh? Right?
God plants trees in Gan Eden.
Right. Exactly. I thought about it. Vayita Adonai Elohim Gan Be'eden Mikedem. God planted the trees in Gan Eden. Then something hit. And I said, Avraham Avinu is calling out by this eshel, right? It's nice to see an eshel. Here's your tamarisk. Oh, it's yogurt too, apparently. Right? Here's your eshel. Okay? So you can imagine for the moment that Abraham Avinu is with people there, and he's gathering them. There was nevuah, an idea of nevuah related to trees back in ancient times. But the Midrash takes it a step further. It says, you know who you're going to say thank you to? Who are you going to bless to? You're going to bless Lemi she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Something we say every day, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Well, where does that come from? Well, in Bereshit, when everything's being created, it says that, well, let's look at it. Which words over there are being used, right? In Bereshit, in the creation of the world. Well, Vayomer Elohim, God says there should be Vayikra, and God calls out and he names. There it's a naming, right? There it's a naming of something. But he's Vayomer Elohim. He uses God's speech, quote unquote, is what creates. Lemi she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Abraham teaching them, you know where everything comes from? This tree that bears fruits, right? And all the sustenance that you get, that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately. And so this pasuk of Vayita, with Abraham planting, who plants to call out in the name of God? Right? If anything, you build a mizbeach. No, Abraham planted. He planted, similar in my opinion to God planting. When God planted, it was for humans to use, but they needed to appreciate it. They needed to take care of it. They needed to tend to the world. And Adam Arishon and Hava to tend to Gan Eden in order to keep it. Otherwise, there's a Gerush. Otherwise, you're kicked out of Gan Eden. Avraham comes back and he teaches that valuable lesson to the world. And he says, you think it's from me? No. Mishel Elohe Olam achaltem. You're not eating from mine, you're eating from God. Elohe Olam. Hodu v'shivhu ubarechu le'mi she'amar v'haya ha'olam. And now every time when I say Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, I think about this midrash. I think about the appreciation we should have for God that Abraham wanted to teach. So really, throughout my understanding of Midrash, it just grew an appreciation. Instead of looking at Midrash, which sometimes we often do and say, oh, what's going on over here? And what does this mean? And is this even happening? Versus, look at the beauty here. There's something deeper I need to uncover, and I can uncover more, and I can keep digging. I could take the shovel and keep digging and keep digging and keep digging, right? And I'm digging out these gems, these jewels that for me, throughout this series of classes over the past few weeks, what I got out of it for myself is even more of an appreciation when I studied Midrashim, because there was something I didn't understand that I had to think about. And that's okay. That's why it's derash. It's not going to be so simple to just grasp it. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. But ultimately, we'll circle back now. Ultimately, back to the Rambam that we started with this year, with the appreciation of the Midrashim in our first class, actually, which was on June 29th, where we learned that over here, I'm not sure, I don't think I'm sharing my screen, give me a moment. Back over here, this Kat Shelishit, the third group that the Rambam says that they're me'atim ad me'od, they're so small they might not be able to be called a group. That they understand Tov sichla mima shenimsa b'chad divrehem morim al inyanim amitiyim lim'od. They're very true matters, not necessarily in reality that they happen, but the concepts in them are true, right? And it teaches us about the Hachamim and the way the Hachamim spoke, right? And when you delve deeper into it, right? So you understand the beauty of it. The emunut, the yosher, כמו שנאמר למסוד דברי חפץ וכתוב יושר דברי אמת ואז תקל בספרי זה ויועיל לך בעזרת השם. So hopefully I was able to impart that. I hope I gave a greater understanding of Midrashim. Thank you so much for joining us this summer for this SCA class series on Midrashim. And I'm hoping that this can continue. If I give any more classes like this, I'll let you know. But have a wonderful summer.